When you first open Flash CS6, you'll get a screen that looks something like this. Generally, all you need to do is to click on the one that says ActionScript 3, and that will open up a window for you. Now, this window is what's called our stage area, and this is where all the action takes place. First thing you have to do is to decide how big you actually want your stage area to be. So, in your properties panel on the right, any object that you click on, you see the properties for it on this right hand side. So at the moment we're looking at the properties of the stage because there isn't anything else yet. The size is here. These can be changed, so I'm going to change this stage size and I'm going to make it something like 800, and maybe I'll make it 600 in height. And I'm also going to change the stage color by clicking here. I'm going to just make mine a dark grey for now. So this is what my stage area looks like. Now I can move these windows here to make this stage area fit, or I can drop down here and I can change the size, make it 25% or fit to the window and so on, to see how I'm going to use it. Before I go any further, I'm going to basically save what I'm doing so far. So I'm going to go File, Save As, choose a suitable place. I'm going to call this one Rocket 2. So I've already made a Rocket 1. But I'm going to do this to show you how it works, and you'll notice here that this is a FLA file, an FLA. So this is basically a Flash project file. So I'm going to save that, and you'll see at the top here now it says Rocket 2 FLA, telling me that I've got that one open. I could have more than one open if I wanted to at a time. Okay, before we do too much else, let's just explain a few of the things that you're looking at on the screen. So we've obviously got a load of drop-down menus at the top here. Over on the right hand side, along this right hand edge, we've got a bunch of tools that we can use. These are additional tools here that can be expanded by clicking on them. And in the right hand side, this big area, these are called panels. Now at the moment I've got one called Properties and one called Library that I can flick between. Any other panels that I might want to use, I'll basically open up the window here and I'll tick on them. So later on we're going to be using the Buttons library, so I'll switch that on when I need it. At the bottom, on the right hand side, at the bottom here is the timeline. Now the timeline basically allows me to create layers and also to place things on these layers, and this timeline, as it moves across, is how long something goes on for. And you'll see that explained in a minute. One thing I'm going to do before we go any further though is I'm going to change what's called the frames per second on this one. So I'm still on the stage properties, and where it says 24 frames per second, I'm going to change that just to 10 for now. So what that actually means, if I come down here and I look at these different marks, if I showed something on screen from 0 to 10, that would mean I would see it for 1 second. Okay, so there's 10 frames each second. If I showed it for 20 seconds, so from 0 to 20, we would see it on screen for 2 seconds. Okay, there are two things I want to do before we start building. The first one is to create some layers to put some different objects on. And the second thing is to start bringing some things into our library to use. So I'm going to create, I think I'm going to create about 5 layers to start with. So I'm just going to click down here and create 5 layers. And I'm going to rename them. So the top one I'm just going to call Actions. And it's always good to have the top one called Actions. The Actions one is where we put our coding in. So we put some code to make things happen. I'm going to have one called Button, which is where I'm going to put my button. If I was having more than one button, I'd probably put them all on this layer. I'm going to have one I'm going to call Rocket, and I'm going to have a spaceship flying on this one. I'm going to have one called Planets, which I'm going to put some stars and planets and things on. And then the bottom one, I'm just going to call that one Text, because I'm going to put some words onto this screen. So these are my layers. You can see they're color coded, and they've also got some options up here for locking the layers or for hiding the layers from so I can't see them. So if I clicked on there, it would mean that that layer wasn't visible. If I clicked on here, it would mean that this layer was locked, so I couldn't do anything to it, I couldn't damage it. And you'll see how that works in a moment when we actually put some things on the layers. Okay, the next thing I want to do is actually bring some things into my library. So I'm going to click onto my library tab. Here's my library. So this library will be associated with this project. Okay, so I'm going to bring some things in. I'm going to go File, Import, and I'm going to say Import to my library. And I'm going to bring in some pictures that I've got off the internet. So I've got 4 pictures here. I'm going to hold those 4 down and I'm going to say Open. And it will bring them in. And if I click on any of those now, I can actually see the preview above of what they are. And you'll notice that these are all called PNG files. They're from the internet. I'm going to do something a little bit strange with these images now. I'm going to drag them out one at a time, And instead of actually just using them as an image, I'm going to turn them into something which is called a symbol. And I do that by pressing F8 on my keyboard, and convert to symbol pops open. I'm going to choose, there's three different sorts. I'm going to choose graphic because that's what they are, pictures, and I'm just going to rename them, but this time I'm going to put the little word SYM, or the letters SYM afterwards, to show that they're symbols. So this is my moon symbol, and once I've done that I can delete it from the stage area, and you'll see over here now I've got this moon symbol. I'm going to do the same with planet. I'm going to press F8. I'm going to turn that I'll do the same for rocket. Press F8. Now one thing I want to be careful of is that I actually keep the same format, so I better keep a capital letter on that one so that I'm keeping them all the same. Delete that one from there again. Then the last one is my star. Now these stars are probably a bit bigger than I need them to be, so I'm going to hold down Shift and drag my stars a bit smaller, and I'm going to turn that into a symbol as well by pressing F8, and we'll call that one star underscore SYM for symbol. Now the reason for turning these pictures into symbols is that later on we can do more things with symbols. Symbols can be multiple used, so I can drag more than one star off, but it only takes up the space of one star in terms of memory. Also, I can make them see-through. I can do transparency things with them. They're much more useful than just straightforward pictures, so we're going to use those in a moment. Okay, let's take a look at how we use our layers now, how we put things on them and make them animate. So I'm going to come down to my text layer and I click in this very first frame. These are called frames, these little boxes, these little cells. So I'm in frame number 1 and I'm on layer called text. Now if I want to make sure I don't go on any other layers, I can lock all my layers apart from the one I'm working on, so I can't accidentally put anything in the wrong place. So now I'm here, I'm going to go with my text tool, click text. I'm going to click somewhere in the middle here, and I'm going to just write something in. I'm going to say click the start button. Okay, and I can select that with my selection tool, and I can move that across. Now if I want to position that really nicely, I can use my positioning on my alignment panel here, and it's aligning to the stage, so I can say put it in the middle and put it in the center. So that's perfectly in the middle of that stage area now. I can close that out of the way. If I didn't want that color for the button, now when I go back into my properties, I can see now that I've clicked on this, I'm in properties for text. So I can go into my text color. Maybe I don't want it to be white, I want it to be green. I can change it, and I can change anything about it, the size of the writing, the font style, and so on. But at the moment, all I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it looking like that. Now on my layer here, you can see that the one where the word has been placed in has gone grey and it's got a filled in black dot on it. That means that it's a keyframe and there's something in there. I'm going to take this one up to 10, which basically means if I press F5 now, it fills in all of these frames up to frame 10. That means that if I now play this, it will play for 10 frames, which we already know is 1 second. So for 1 second it will display click the start button. I'm going to go to frame 11. Now I'm going to press a different button. I'm going to press F6. Now F6 does something clever. It copies what's in the frame before it and makes a duplicate of it. So now I can edit this writing by going into it, and I can type something different in. So I'm going to say Mr. Morgan, and I'm going to again center this nicely, and I'm going to change the color again. Let's change that one, and again I'm going to go to frame 20 this time and press F5 to duplicate it out again, and I'm going to do one more time. I'm going to click here, I'm going to go F6 to copy the frame. I'm going to come into it, I'm going to say something else. I'm going to call it presents. I'm going to change the color of it over here to something completely different, maybe a red color, and again I'm going to position it to make sure it's completely in the middle. Okay, if I now click off and I take this one up to 30 by pressing F5. You can see now I've got all these different things, and as you drag this across, this is called the playhead. I'm dragging my playhead across my timeline. You can see it change. Okay, so it gets to 10, and when it goes to 11 it changes to this one, comes along, goes to the next one, changes again. And if I want to see that how this is going to work for real, all I've got to do is press Control and Enter. I'm actually going to do Control and S first to save it. Control and Enter, and it will build what's called a flash file. So this is no longer the project file, which is an FLA. This is the finished movie, which is called an SWF, a SWIFT file. And as you can see, it just keeps looping through. So until I put some code into it to tell it to stop, it's just going to keep going back to the beginning and starting all over again. Okay, we'll stop that now. Okay, we're going to look at putting some actual content on the screen now. So I'm going to lock off the layer with my text on, so I know that that one's safe. And I'm going to unlock my planets layer. And I'm going to go to one frame further on. So I'm on frame 31 now, but I'm on my planets layer, which I've unlocked. This time I'm going to press F7. F7 is going to give me an empty blank keyframe, so it's ready to have something done to it. So I'm going to come over to my library now, and on my library I've got some various things. I've got moon, planet, stars, and I'm going to actually put some of these out there. So I'm going to take my moon out first of all. My moon's much bigger than I want it to be, so I'm going to use my free transform tool, hold down shift while I drag, and I'm going to drag my moon and make it a bit smaller and put it up here somewhere. I'm going to take my planet, I'm going to bring my planet in somewhere. I'm also going to bring in some stars. Now I can bring in more than one star. I can bring in as many stars as I want because they're all different instances of the same thing. And I can even grab on different ones and make them different sizes so they don't all have to look the same. Makes it look a bit more varied. Move them around. I can reposition them anytime I want to. Now all of these objects are now on this layer. They're on my planets layer. They're in that particular cell there, which is frame 31. And I'm going to bring this one up now, and I'm going to take it up to frame 60. I'm going to press F5, and that means now that when I bring my playhead across, I'll see this text for 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, and I'll see this frame, or these frames, for 2 more seconds. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to lock my planets because we're done with that one. I'm going to unlock my rocket layer. I'm going to come up to the same position here, which is frame 31, and I'm going to press F7 again, but this time I'm on this layer, on my rocket layer. Press F7, and again I get my my new keyframe here, which is empty, and I'm going to, while I'm on that particular frame, I'm going to drag my rocket over here. Now my rocket is allowed to go off my stage. That's not a problem. So I'm going to grab my rocket, I'm going to hold down shift and make it a bit smaller, and I'm going to bring it so it's just off the stage. So basically we won't be able to see it. And what I want to do is I want it to come sailing across like this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to extend my timeline up to here by pressing F5 again. So that means it's going to be visible for all that time. But I want to add now what's called a motion tween. So while I'm clicked on here and I click into here, I right click and I choose create motion tween. Now all I've got to do is drag this to the finishing point, which is here, and it creates a line for me. Now if I move my playhead, you can see this is what's going to happen. My rocket's going to go along that line. Now there's 2 things I want to do to it. I'm actually going to change this line a little bit so it's curved. So I'm going to choose my selection tool, and you'll see that when I hover now over the line, it turns to a curve. So I'm going to drag this into a curved sort of shape, and I'm on the input here. I'm going to choose using my selection tool, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to grab it, hold down shift again, and drag it. Also, not only am I going to make it bigger, let's make this a bit smaller so we can see the whole thing. I'm going to turn the angle of it so it looks like it's curved around more like this. Okay, and we'll see what that looks like. So that looks like it follows along that route, and as it goes across, it's getting closer to the camera, so it's getting bigger. I might even let it get a bit bigger than that again. Let's see what that looks like. So there's my spaceship, and if I want it to move completely off, I need to move this end point. So when I'm here at the very end, I need this to be slightly off screen. And again, I'm going to do Control S to save and Control Enter to see what it all looks like for real. And there we go, there's my spaceship sailing through. Okay, we're now ready to start doing some of the more complicated stuff, actually getting a button to work and to control it all. So I'm going to close the rocket and put that little lock on it, and I'm going to open my button layer. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to put a button on my layer now, which basically shows for the time that this is on screen, so from the very beginning right the way across, and then afterwards I want to attach some action script code to it. So first of all, I'm going to choose where I want it to go. I'm going to put it into this first frame on the buttons layer, but I need to find a button to use. So if I go into my window and go to common libraries, there's one called buttons. I'm going to open that one up, and inside this one now there's a whole bunch of different ones that we can use. We'll have a little look. I think maybe I'll go for a blue button. I'm going to drag that one out, and I'm going to position it over here on my screen. I don't need to keep this up any longer, I can close it, but you'll see now that the button has actually turned up in my library. Now, there's a few things I need to do with this button. It's very small at the moment. Let's zoom up so we can see it a little bit bigger. Put it to a couple of 100% maybe. There's the button itself. When I click on the button and I'm in my properties, I need to give it a name. Okay, this is an instance name. This is how the button is going to be recognized. So I'm going to call it rocket underscore BTN as the word button. So that's what this thing's going to be referred to when we put code in. So the code will know what it's going to actually make happen, because it knows that this is the name of it. Okay, I'm going to go into this button now I'm going to select it and I'm going to double click it. Okay, and what we can do now is we can rename the button. So here inside this button, we're inside the layers that are inside the button, and again we got various locks on. I'm going to take the lock off the one that says text. Now I can edit the word enter, and I can just change that and make it call it rocket or something like that, because that's what it's going to do. This is just a label on the button. I could call it anything. But when I've done that, I'll put my lock back on again, and I'll come back out by going scene 1, and it takes me all the way back out. So my button's on screen. It's been labeled, and I've changed the name on it to something that we recognize, but I need to make sure that that's visible at least until this thing starts. But we can take it to the very end, it's not a problem. And I'm going to press F5, and that now produces that layer, so I can see this for the whole time that the animation's going on. So if I go back to fit into the window, if I take my playhead, wherever I am, I can see my button in that bottom left corner. Okay, I'm going to lock off my button layer again, and I'm going to unlock my actions layer. Okay, this is where it can get a little bit tricky if we're not careful. So what I'm going to do first of all, I'm going to come here. I'm on my actions layer, but I'm going to go to the second frame, and in the second frame I'm going to press F7 and create a brand new empty keyframe. But in that keyframe, all I want to do is give it a label. Okay, I'm in my properties, and I'm going to call this one rocket, and I'm going to call it underscore LBL, rocket label. If I press enter now, you'll see as I press F5 a few times, that will appear. The name there's on the label. I can go right to the end there, doesn't matter. So that whole thing, but basically frame 2 has got a name. Now we need to give it a name so that we can basically say in our button, go to frame 2 and then start playing. So what we want to do now is to click into frame 1, and in frame 1 is where I'm going to put my action script code. So I'm going to now switch from timeline view to actions view. Now if your actions view isn't showing at the bottom here, as mine was, all you got to do is click on window, find where it says actions, which is here, and switch it on. Okay, but we've got ours switched on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the code that I'm providing you for on the website. So if I come up to the website, this is the motion tween task, and there's one there that says code provided. If I click on there, it opens up a little text file. Now the bits of code we're interested in using, the first one is this one, the one called stop. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to press Control C and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to come in here onto number 1 and press Control V and paste it in. Now, as I press enter a few times, it will produce numbers. It doesn't matter how much spaces we got between them. The computer ignores the spaces and it just does each line of code at a time. So this first line of code basically just says stop. So as soon, if we go back to our timeline view, as soon as this starts playing, it gets to frame 1 and it stops. Doesn't do anything else. The playhead doesn't move across here. It just stays there saying click the start button. Okay, what we now want to do is add a second bit of code that basically says when we click this button called rocket, start the animation, make it go across here. So I'm going to go back into my actions area, and I'm also going to come back and lift up my code again to copy, and I want to use one called go to and play. So I want it to actually, I'm going to take this bottom one here, and I'm going to copy all of that code, and I'm going to come back into my Flash, come down to about number 3 and paste it in again. Okay, all I need to do now is to edit it so that it understands what I want to do. And there's a few things I have to change. First of all, the label name. Now we called our label, okay, I think we called it rocket underscore LBL, because it's basically saying jump to the position called rocket label, and that's where you play it from. Okay, we need to give it its own function name. Now this one, it doesn't matter, we can call it anything we want, as long as we copy it here and here to be the same thing. So I'm just going to call this one rocket play. Oops, if I could spell like that. In fact, I can just copy and paste that rather than type it again and make a mistake. So I'll copy that. I'm going to come up to this one, and where it says function name again, I'm just going to pop that in there again and paste that in. So it's called rocket play. That's just the name that I've made up for it. The last thing it wants to know is the instance of the button. This is the name of the button. So this is the name of the button. This one's the name of the label. Okay, but the name of the button, we called it rocket underscore BTN. Okay, so it's basically saying it's going to stop, then it's going to look here. It's looking for this mouse click event. So when someone clicks on the one called rocket button, it's going to run this procedure called rocket play, and all that's going to do is basically go to and play from the label called rocket label. So we'll come back to our timeline, make this a little bit bigger so we can see it all working. I'm going to do Control S to save, and I'm going to do Control Enter to test it. Okay, now that looks like it's going to work. It's stopped at the moment, which is what it's supposed to do. So basically it's not going to do anything until we click the button. When we click the button, hopefully, there we go, it all works. It should go all the way through the animation, and then it stops again. This is back on frame number 1 again, and again if we clicked again it would work again. Now the only thing that's liable to go wrong with doing this is if you have the names wrong in your code. So if you come back into this code and look at it, you have to make sure if it doesn't work correctly, you need to check that rocket play and rocket play, whatever you called yours, that these have got the same name exactly, and that you've got the label correctly typed in, and you've got the button name correctly typed in. If you do all that correctly, it will work. The ones that don't work are always due to a typing error. Good luck.